But then we also had, like, at night, Robin Williams would drop in, Seinfeld would drop in, Chris Rock, like, everybody would drop in.
Live from the Willie Nelson and Friends Museum Showcase in Nashville, Tennessee. It's Music is Funny. Musicians talking to comedians about music and comedy. With your hosts, Raelyn Nelson and Jonathan Bright.
Smoking, I'm so high, I keep toking, I'm drunk, but I'm still drinking too.
Welcome back to Music is Funny. I'm Raelyn Nelson.
And I'm Jonathan Bright with another ridiculous but very necessary intro for this one. Look, when you guys watch this, we do a bit talking about Townes Van Zandt. And I mistakenly remembered...
You fucked up.
...the story of Graham Parsons getting buried in Joshua. Not even buried. He got burnt. I said buried by a tree.
He said that his friends stole his body
They're
from the funeral home.
They're going to hear what I said.
Takes him out to a desert and buries him by a tree.
So you guys can comment with your little snarky comments and scream at the podcast going, Graham Parsons, it's Graham Parsons.
Turns out it was Graham Parsons, and they took him out to Joshua Tree and burned his body.
It's not my fault. Raelyn's on her period, and I might have had one too many hits before we started. Anyway.
Mark Riccadonna.
Hey.
Buddy.
How are you?
Good, how are you? You got your tree up and everything.
We did that last night, so it's still messy, but...
It looks great. It looks great.
Yeah. I just watched the Don Jamieson one this morning.
Yeah?
While I was waiting to go in. Yeah, it was great. You guys are a lot of fun.
We'll see.
Man. Well, yeah, I started my period about an hour ago, so.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, she's a ball of fun right now.
I'm so much fun. I'm yelling at him every 2 seconds. I'm like, turn the ring light up. And I'm like, ow, every 2 seconds. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, this should be a lot of fun. First of all, how great was the other night? You were great.
Oh yeah, you were privy. Hold on, you were privy to Raelyn's first 5 minutes ever of doing stand-up.
Yeah.
So she won't. Don't listen, Raelyn. Give me the real truth about this.
I honest to God, and I said it to her. I said I would have never thought it was your first time. She did it like a pro. Like she came out, she hit him right up front with a good joke, and then she had a couple little bits here and there, and then she had a story that went through, and I was like, that's how a pro would put a set together, you know?
Yeah.
She got laughs through the whole thing.
All you need is good jokes, and you'll be right there. She played me the audio. I was like, oh, too bad. Yeah.
I was pleasantly surprised, and I don't think she got away with having a name and it being like a celebrity thing. I think everybody in the audience was like, be funny or don't, you know.
Oh, totally, because it's in Nashville. Nobody gives a shit about her name, so there's stars everywhere. So that's a good place to start. Yeah, and it kind of it made me happy for her, but it also made me sad that she didn't bomb. Because some of my favorite stuff is when we're playing out and she tries to tell a joke and it's just crickets. It's my favorite thing in the world.
But I told you I can say and a 1 and a 2, and I told him that. He said when I told him that I can do that, you know. So
you can do that at stand up anyway, I would think.
Well, so he was like, you should start off your set by saying that, and then that way, if you tell a joke and it bombs, you can turn around and go, and a 1 and a 2.
That's not about, it can be your hamburger.
Yeah.
Hamburger. Can I tell you, listening to your podcast, you guys are really well versed in comedy. Like, you guys are like comedians insider.
Yeah, we listen to a lot of it in the van because we can't, we don't agree on music to listen to at all. So it's all podcasts, stand-ups, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And we like the music we make together.
Yeah,
we like our music, but we don't really listen to it in the van.
Nah, every now and then we'll agree on a song or two.
Now, then give me the breakdown. Who's what? Who likes what? Style.
I like girly shit. And he likes.
She's a Swiftie, and I like old school punk rock.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So I mean, we like a bunch of different things.
We do.
But if we had to settle in, that's where the divide happens. Because she, I grew up on Kiss and she grew up on NSYNC. Basically 2 different boy bands, but
both wearing eye makeup.
Yeah.
Yeah, but also when we do, because sometimes late at night in the van, we'll do the DJ thing where everybody gets to pick one song and then you pass it. And so you and I never go for NSYNC or Kiss.
That's true.
So
we generally try to find something that the other person likes. Then it turns into old school hip hop at that point.
Yeah, eventually. Okay, so let's finally, I mean, we've already started the podcast, but we have to start by asking you, Mark, what is the first music you remember loving as a kid?
Okay, so this is a weird one because I'm a metalhead. I love metal. I grew up, I'm 40, but everybody around me is much older. So I was a little kid in diapers listening to Van Halen. And I actually, one of my oldest memories of music was me and my cousins laughed so hard at this that it stuck in my head. I'm in diapers. I'm painting fake hair on my chest with my cousin's eyeliner and posing in the mirror trying to look like David Lee Roth.
Wow. In diapers.
But I was in diapers. So they were rolling laughing, thinking it was the funniest shit ever. So I kind of got my first laugh and my first music memory was doing that. But
that's really funny.
The first concert I ever went to, funny enough, was the Oak Ridge Boys.
I've seen them back in the day, actually. My parents were huge fans.
They were at the Ohio State Fair. And that was like the first concert I've ever seen, but
dude, they were kind of the shit back in the day, though. They were. I mean, my brother's older. My brother's in a metal band called Dizzy Whore. So it's kind of screwed up when the comic's the good kid in the family. But we were really in the hard rock, metal, that kind of stuff. But another really fond memory of being young to music was my grandmother listened to Dolly Parton, and I would be in her. She had this huge Lincoln, and I'd be standing on the back seat with my hands on the front seats, because
driving.
Yeah, childhood safety. Who gives a fuck about that? And I remember sitting there, and she'd be smoking cigarettes and listening to Dolly Parton.
I was just about to ask if there were cigarettes, because every time somebody talks about the old school Lincoln, there's generally cigarettes in the car involved.
Oh, yeah. The smoking Winston's, windows up, keep it in there, keeping it in there. And so, like, those are memories, like Van Halen, Dolly Parton, Oak Ridge Boys. I have a weird, it was a very eclectic thing growing up.
Back then, things weren't quite as segmented as they are now. Anyway, some of those top 40 stations, you were liable to hear fucking Elvira and Dance the Night Away on the same radio station, Yeah,
that's true. You know what I noticed when there was a big divide in music? Because I liked hip hop, even though I was really in the hard rock. Like, I still, like, if a hip hop song came on, I didn't really care. But when I got in high school, there was the great divide. The basketball players all loved hip hop, and they hated the wrestlers, who were the dirty metalheads. And I really didn't want to wrestle in high school. I played football. I didn't want to wrestle, but I sucked at basketball, and I liked heavy metal. So I was like, well, I'm going to go hang out with the wrestlers.
You picked your sport on your musical taste. That's great.
Yeah. But it's also the linemen on our football team were all metalheads. They liked, we're listening to like Iron Maiden and stuff. And the guys who were like the receivers and the running backs, they liked more modern top 40.
Yeah.
So it was like, I'm a lineman.
I guess I'll be a lineman.
Did you ever think that you could start a band, a metal band?
So it was funny because I was listening to you guys talking with Don, and so my brother was really into music. I played drums, but I should say I practiced drums. I didn't play them. I wasn't good, but I liked it. But we built fake instruments and 2 neighbors, and we put on Kiss concerts in our garage.
Dude, I did the same thing. Not Kiss concerts, but we had fake instruments, but we took it one step further. We did it up in my parents' attic, and we'd get some of the neighborhood kids to come over, and we'd take our allowance, and we'd go buy a bunch of candy, and then we would upsell it to the kids for like 50 cents more, and then we would sell them water out of the hose. And then my mom found out about it and went crazy. He's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Mom, I made $5." She's like, "You give that back to them." So yeah, we were running scams back then.
You were running the merch game back in there.
Totally, exactly.
I got candy, 1 for $1.
Exactly.
Dude, we should add candy to the merch table,
It's not
maybe.
about sweet tarts are a big hit. Trust me. If we play gigs in the attic and we can sell water.
Just wrap it in a bandana.
No, we didn't wrap it in anything. It was literally from the.
But we will.
Oh,
we
yeah.
have to keep it in brand.
I got you.
Did it in like stuff that would be like stuff with when people have the munchies would want.
Wow.
Because then, when they're passing the joint around while they're watching you play, they're building up their hunger after the show. Come on, get a cupcake and a shirt.
Yeah.
Cheetos and
Combo of chips and rolling papers.
Yeah, Cheetos with the sweet tart.
Yeah.
It has to be something savory and sweet. My uncle Lucas has a band called Promise of the Real. Remember, Anthony told us, his drummer told us that he would take on the road with them what is it? A
toaster oven or something?
Or it was like it was grilled cheese.
Oh,
so
a press thing.
Yeah, some sort of press.
Did he need press?
And after the shows, he would set up outside and just go to the nearest store, get the cheapest bread, the cheapest cheese, the cheapest butter, and just make grilled cheese for them and sell them 2 for $5. After he's like,
that's brilliant.
I was making a lot of money doing it. It really is genius. It's genius. Anyway. Okay, so you guys made the fake instruments. We're back in the garage. You're making fake instruments, doing the Kiss shows, right?
Did you paint your face?
Yeah. Well, what was funny is we'd paint our faces, but then we'd switch characters because everybody wanted to be Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley.
Yeah.
So I'd be playing drums, and then all of a sudden it was like, okay, I get to be Gene this song, right? And like, even though I had the cat makeup on, I got to go up and play bass for a little bit.
So did you try your hand at any pyro or any special lighting effects or smoke machines or any of that stuff?
No, I would love to say yes and have a good story, but we were.
You're like, Grandma, come to the garage and smoke your Winstons.
Yeah.
Shine a flashlight to it. Exactly.
Okay, so that's what age were you there? Like 19, 20?
25.
This was last week, but I was probably like 8 or 9.
Okay.
My brother was he was probably 10, 11 area.
Yeah.
He was playing real guitar, but when we did our Kiss shows, we had to use the fake ones. We weren't allowed to use the real instruments.
So did he stay in bands from that point on, or was it something like, if he's still in a band now, he must have been playing forever?
Yeah, and he was in and out. Like he went to art school and did all this stuff, and then started the band later. Started back up, but it was like a junior high school thing, and then in his 30s he got back into it. But like, they don't have any grand illusion of making it. They're like, hey, we kick it around on the weekends. It's a lot of fun. We rehearse and have fun. That's
perfect.
Yeah.
So talking about the early, when was your first favorite comedian, or how did you get introduced to comedy?
So funny enough, same house that I did the David Lee Roth.
This house was jumping, man.
Yeah, they had kids. Their kids were in like junior high and high school, and I was in like diapers. And I remember my Aunt Mary and the same grandma sitting on the couch waiting for the kids to come home, and it'd be late at night, and we'd watch Johnny Carson.
Okay.
And I would pretend I was asleep, and I'd have my head on their lap, and they'd be like rubbing my head, and we'd watch Johnny Carson. I just loved the comedy. Like, every time a comic came on, I got so excited. And half the time I didn't know what the jokes meant. I just loved that this person was controlling everybody and getting them to laugh and getting them sad and getting them, and it was really amazing to watch. And I stuck with just loving comedy, and like how everybody has their stories with their dad, or like, oh, me and dad would always play catch, and that was our thing we did. And my dad and I, every Sunday, we would get a humongous meat and cheese plate, sit in front of the TV on Sundays and watch the comic strip live, the Ben Stiller show, The Simpsons, and there was one other show. And then when Beverly Hills 90210 came on, I went up and got my bath and got ready for school for Monday. Got my stuff ready. So that was our thing.
Yeah. What age range is this roughly?
This is all through grade school and junior high. That was like every Sunday. That was our tradition.
Was your dad a funny guy? Or is he a funny guy?
Yeah, he is. My dad loves, like, he's the guy at Thanksgiving dinner who has like 5 jokes. Like, all right, a joke before we start eating. Yeah. Like, he'll have a joke. My friends that are comedians like love, and I used to get embarrassed about it, but like they would love, like, oh, is your dad coming to the show? Like if we were on the road and I go, yeah, he's coming. And they're like, oh, good. I wonder what joke he's going to tell. And like, they loved it. And I would get embarrassed because I'm like, oh, don't tell jokes. You know, don't tell comedians a joke. But they loved it. And my dad could sense it, I guess. So he always had jokes ready for him. And now when I first started as a comic, I started really early. I hated jokes, like when people would tell street jokes. And now, I mean, my whole podcast is about how much I love jokes. I love hearing, even if it's the same joke, I guess it'd be the same for you guys, like hearing somebody cover a song. I want to hear your version of that joke. Mm-hmm. Like, it's like a standard song, you know, let's say My Way, you know, it's like, okay, let's hear Ozzy Osbourne do My Way. Like, you know, so I love hearing, especially comic or a musician, because they know how to hold a crowd, tell a joke that you may already know, but they might throw a curveball in there.
Do you think it would be okay for me to perform Bert Kreischer's The Machine?
I mean,
my version of it. To your friends,
yes. I mean, I'm not somebody else's joke. I mean, just street jokes.
I've often wondered where street jokes originate. One person had to come up with it. I mean, there are, I guess, premises or whatever. Oh, stop that. But there's so many old, like, street jokes that nobody gets any credit for, you know, and there's a lot of them.
I'm really glad people get the credit.
I mean, I absolutely, you know who would know is Rich Scheidner. Rich Scheidner, like, has a one-man show that's the complete history of stand-up comedy.
Ooh.
And I bet he would know, because everybody thinks Mark Twain was the first stand-up comic.
He was funny.
It wasn't. It was a guy named Artemus Ward who Mark Twain ripped. He didn't rip him off, but he kind of did.
Got the idea.
Yeah, they would do shows, and it would be like, are you a singer, a magician, or whatever? And they asked this guy, Artemus Ward, like, what's your thing? And he goes, I'm just going to make the audience laugh as hard as they can for as long as they can. That's my show. And he was the first guy to ever do it. Wow. And he knew he was going to die. He had tuberculosis. And Mark Twain was his buddy. And there were humorous columnists, you know, for newspapers. And Mark Twain saw what he was doing and go, I want to do that. And, you know, the guy who lives longer gets to tell the story.
Wow. Yeah. That's interesting.
That is really interesting.
Because I love Mark Twain.
Yeah, I want to look more into that. And also, I've always thought that philosophers, like the first philosophers, were probably funny in some way, you know, because they had to hold somebody's attention, you know. And
yeah, I saw Bill and Ted's. Socrates was hysterical.
Exactly.
Okay, so what music, or I'm going to go back to music just for a second. What music do you listen to now? Are you still the metal guy? No?
So here's what's funny. Years later, I moved to New York City. And I have, my friends used to say I have the most eclectic iPod they've ever heard, because it will go from something just so obscure. It'll be like Elvis to Iron Maiden.
Right.
You know, like it just bounces all over. But I read an article, of Johnny Knoxville. I was reading this article, and he was talking about a movie he was working on or whatever. And he talked about this documentary, Heart-Worn Highway, and this musician named Townes Van Zandt.
Oh yeah.
And he was talking about how it's this tragic story, but this guy's like a true artist and he's a storyteller. And that's what I'm into, is like storytelling. Is your music tell a story? And so I went and it took me a while to find, but I got it on DVD, and I fell in love with Townes Van Zandt and Steve Earle. And I listened to a ton of them. And my wife and I both love any music that's storytelling.
Yeah.
And like, I love Townes has like, he doesn't have the prettiest voice in the world, but you feel it. You feel what he's singing. It's kind of like a Broadway show or whatever. It's like, you feel what the singer's singing. Yeah, it's not just pretty. I'm hitting all the vocal notes and doing all the exercises and making my voice quiver. It's like, you really believe it. Like Aretha Franklin does it and it's a little more beautiful, but Townes Van Zandt does it and you're like, holy shit, I believe it. Like this guy's been through some shit.
Shit. Not to mention the way he died and the way his buddies stole his body and buried him out in the desert. That was a trip too.
Holy.
Yeah, the whole story about that.
What's the story?
That's too long for this.
No, it's not. So what's the story?
Well, I believe I'm correct. It was Townes. He, I'm going to screw it up. Google it. But basically, his buddies went and stole his body out of the funeral home in a hearse and took him out to. I forget. People are going to be destroying me over this. But anyway,
I feel like I've heard this too. And
they've stole him and they buried him out by a tree.
Holy shit!
A random tree.
Yeah, I think they know where it is now.
Because he wanted to.
The guy in his roadie in town still lives here. Yeah, they were just boys. I can't remember the setup. Google it. It's a fascinating.
Yeah.
He didn't want to be buried in whatever was going to happen.
I can't remember exactly.
Okay, now I have to find out.
It's Weekend at Bernie's with guitars.
Yeah. There you go. So how did you start, Kai? Did you immediately start stand up, or were you? I know you do a bunch of writing too. Or acting. Which one of those came first, and what led into what?
So I was a jock in high school. I was a meathead, like complete like bro. I used to like, I gotta go lift weights before school, like that kind of guy. Yeah. And I got hurt and wasn't going to play football anymore. And I had a football coach who actually said to me, he was like, hey man, you got to do something with yourself, because like you're going to graduate soon and you're not going to college for football. So what are you going to do? And I was like, I like acting. I think I'm going to be an actor. Meanwhile, I have no fucking idea what I'm doing.
Right. Either pro football player or an actor. I don't know. One of those.
Something like that, right? Isn't that the singer from Bush? Like he's like a professional soccer player. Then he decided to be a rock star.
Yeah.
Now he's an actor. Yeah. I made home movies with my brother, like goofing around. Like there was no technique or no whatever. We put on leisure suits and painted on fake mustaches and pretended to arrest each other,
You still have these floating around?
Yeah. And like we made a lot of these. Like it was ridiculous how much we would steal my dad's camcorder and run around. So I looked up acting schools, and like my football coach helped me with all of this. And I auditioned for all these schools and didn't get in the one, except for the only one that did accept me was the best acting school I applied for. So I got dissed by all the like community colleges with acting programs, but the American Academy of Dramatic Arts let me in. So like, guess I'm moving to New York.
Yeah.
I was 17. I moved to New York City, and I fell in love with acting. Like all the passion that I had for sports went immediately into acting, but I was so behind everybody because I was an idiot. Like I didn't read or do anything, so I had to catch up. So like in the morning I'd wake up, I'd go to school, then I'd go to work, I'd have rehearsals. And then instead of going out and having fun, like most kids that leave high school go do? I was reading and trying to catch up and figure out who these people are that everybody's talking about. Like they just knew. And I'm like, shit, I got to find out who is this guy. And I'm like looking everything up. And I loved it. And I was doing pretty good. And I was got some voiceover work and things were moving along, and I needed a day job and I started working at a comedy club.
Okay.
And
which one?
I Stand Up New York on it's on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. And I got hired to be a waiter. Within 2 days, they realized I was an awful waiter. So they didn't want to fire me because they saw how enthusiastic I was. So they were like, would you answer phones and seat people? I'm like, sure. And then as they fired people, I kept getting promoted. And next thing I know, I'm like 19 years old and I'm booking the club.
Nice.
And I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm
Now, how familiar were you with comics and who to book, or were you just winging it at that point?
So they had a list. The club had a list of people who were passed and not passed, but a lot of comics were really excited, I think, for new blood that came in, because I respect the journeyman. I respect the people who've been doing it more than somebody's famous because they're on a TV show or whatever.
Yeah.
So these comics would walk in and I would immediately know who they were. And they would go like, how do you know who I am? And I was like, you were on the comic strip live back in 1991.
So this is where the research paid off. Maybe not in acting, but you knew about the comedy stuff.
Yeah. So like all these comics were like, holy shit, like you saw that? And I'm like, yeah, do you still do that bit about blah, blah, like, and they just loved that I was so into it. And I mean, and I was working with guys before they got famous where it was like on the regular, on the phone with Bill Burr, or, Mark Maron was coming in a lot working on stuff. But then we also had like at night, Robin Williams would drop in, Seinfeld would drop in, Chris Rock, like everybody would drop in. And I was just in this, it was like being just injected into the middle of everything. And I feel like this was a prime time for comedy. It was like Tough Crowd was out.
Oh, that's one of my favorite shows of all time.
People were just going crazy and falling in love with comedy again, because I feel like it kind of lost its luster for a while. And this was making it cool again. And we were, packed every night and great comics coming in. And I started doing it. I was hanging out with the comics. I wanted to try it. Mm-hmm. And next thing you know, I started doing it. And I would go up when people were paying the checks, or if they had to throw somebody out, I'll go on stage, and while the bouncers are throwing somebody out, I would, because I didn't care. I didn't think it was a real thing that I was going to do comedy for a living.
Right.
So I didn't care if I bombed. Plus I booked the room. You know what I mean? So
you're not going to get fired.
Yeah. So it's like, if somebody's going to bomb, let it be me. And I would go up.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead. I enjoyed doing it.
Yeah. So were you aware of how big it was becoming while you were doing it, or was it just a blast while it was happening? Did you have to like look at it in retrospect and go, damn, that was like a golden age that was?
I didn't think it would end or that it would slow down. Like it was like, holy shit, this is,
how it goes. Yeah.
Yeah. This is what comedy is. Like now I get it when people talk about like, the rock star comics are like rock stars. I'm like, yeah, these guys are like having a blast, and it's everybody that's coming in and they're all rooting for each other, working on bits. Like it would be crazy. Like, Robin Williams, Carlin came in once, sat in the back of the room, and he was like, don't let anyone know I'm here. I don't want to take away from the comedians.
Wow.
And he sat in the back of the room, and then he called, and I wasn't in the office. He called and asked to talk to me because he wanted one of the comedians' phone numbers to open for him at the Beacon Theater. And I wasn't in the office, and he goes, hey, well, can I call his house or whatever? And they were like, we're not supposed to give away his number. And he was like, this is George Carlin. I kind of need to talk to him. They're, oh, here's his number. Well, I get a phone call from an 818 number. I don't know who this is. So I click at the voicemail and I tried to save it, but this was like 2003 when you couldn't save voicemails. After 30 days, it disappeared. And it's George Carlin, like, hey, Mark, this is George Carlin. I'm like, holy shit, George Carlin called my fucking phone. So I'm like freaking out. And, but it was like, every day was like that. Like all of a sudden I'm there one day and, you know, Chris Rock comes in and Seinfeld come in matching Porsches. And they both still have the stickers on the window. And like, they're like, hey, can you watch the cars while we go up? Like, yeah, I can do that. Like, I'm watching Chris Rock and Jerry Seinfeld's cars. And so it was like every day something new would happen, something cool would happen. And it was like, it's always going to be like this. And it eventually, fast forward, it's not like this anymore.
Right. Not even for rock stars, much less rock star comedians.
Yeah. Oh my God. And speaking of rock stars, Don, how him and I became so close is when bands would be in New York, they would play and then we would reopen the club at like 2 a.m. when the concert was over. Oh, wow. And the band and the roadies and the family members would all come to the club and we'd do private shows just for the bands. And he used to put those all together. And there was stuff like that where I was like, oh my God, this is what comedy is. You know?
Yeah.
So how long from you just getting up at those spots where you're talking about where they're throwing people out or whatever until you were like, hey, maybe I'll take a run at this? And what's the next step from just getting up there? Is it going out and getting the suburbs or, you know, how does that work?
So it was kind of weird. There was like 3 or 4 comics and the biggest name being Greg Giraldo.
Love Greg Giraldo.
That saw what I was doing and saw that it was like, I'm going up and I'm basically trying to get a rambunctious crowd to just listen.
Right.
And to pay attention. So then we can go back to the regular scheduled show. And Greg offered me work because he wanted to do a long set. So he didn't want to MC a feature, whatever. He just wanted somebody to get the crowd together, get them going, bring him on, and then he takes it from there. So he actually offered me money to go on the road. You know, like, hey man, I'll throw you, $100, come down to Princeton with me. And I also had a car so I could drive. And
drive him?
Yeah. So it's like, you mean you're going to give me $100 to just get people to listen? Like, and he's like, yeah, and I'll pay for gas and tolls. I'm like, hell yeah. Like, this is awesome. And I still didn't think it was a thing that was like, oh, I could make a living at this, because I was still trying to do the acting stuff, you know?
Yeah.
And after a while, I started to kind of get in demand where I was like turning down road work. I was going like, oh man, I'm already doing something that week. That's crazy, but thanks. And then next thing I was like, well, maybe I should make a run at this and give it a try. And I also had that job at Stand Up New York booking. So it was like kind of a safety net.
Sure.
But after a while, I realized it was a conflict, because I would be on the road and then comics would know that I booked the club. So they would want to talk about getting bookings.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to be a comedian, you know, and I'm like, hey man, I'm a comic tonight. You got to leave me alone. You know, like I'm just trying to do my thing. And so I had to give up one or the other, and I didn't really care to book that much. So
how was the road with Giraldo? Because I guess depending on which era you were out with him, it could have been a wild scene, you know? Because
it was. I never did drugs with him.
Right.
I suspected he did after we would leave.
Well, he had a driver, of course. Yeah, perfect. Yeah,
but I did. You know, I legally should not have been driving a lot.
Right.
I didn't. He sobered up, and then he had a couple, off the wagon moments. But when he was trying to sober up, he had sober comics that he would go on the road with. So I didn't see sober Greg. I was with party Greg.
Gotcha. I wondered if you qualified for the sober comic. I'm sober now.
Yeah, now I would sober up to work with him again.
Sure. Yeah, he was one of my favorites. That whole Tough Crowd era, all those guys, just hysterical.
Unbelievable, just smart comedy. They were working on new stuff, but they were also like a lot of the newer comics that are blowing up right now, in my opinion. They're trying. Those guys these guys are trying,
Right.
like they're trying to be edgy. They're trying to be poignant. Like Doug Stanhope is a perfect example of this. Doug Stanhope may have done more damage to comedy than good, only because of all the people who try to be Doug Stanhope and are not. There's only him.
Right.
He's amazing.
We've talked to him. He was our first podcast, one of my favorite of all time. But there is only one fucking Doug Stanhope.
Oh, and all the people who are trying to be him suck. Like,
Right.
Don't try to be him.
It's not an act with Doug.
Yeah, you have to be you. And when you're trying, there's a lot of comics I love, I adore, but I can't be them. I can only be me. And maybe it's why I never got a break and, something big happened, but I can only be me. And I'm a storyteller. A lot of my stuff's long-winded. But I love what I do. I love doing it. I love performing for people. And I see a lot of guys who are trying to be Dave Attell. They're trying to be Doug Stanhope. They're trying to be Jim Norton. And the authentic, basically what comes out to me is there's a lot of comics and I go, that's Dave Attell if he wasn't a good writer. Right. Oh, that's Mitch Hedberg if he was, not so smart. And that's what they come across to me as. Like, I can watch a comic and immediately go, I know who they're trying to be.
And it's probably tough for young comics, like young musicians. Whoever your favorite is, you initially are going to sound like that. Yeah. I remember talking to Tom Papa, which is another guy that's hysterical, as funny as Doug Stanhope. But he was talking about Giraldo. I asked him if he ever tried to dirty it up a little bit, just because of the crew he was running around the scene. He said he just dabbled in it for a second and realized it wasn't him. And it's like, I'm not even going to pretend. That's why he's one of the funniest guys in the world, because he's a genuinely funny guy and he is Tom Papa. And he's not trying to pretend to be rougher than anybody,
Yeah. I mean, that's, to me, is like, I wanted to be not Mitch Hedberg. I wanted to be like a Rodney Dangerfield or Stephen Wright. Like, I wanted jokes.
Right.
Then I realized I'm not smart enough to write jokes that good.
Who's got that kind of time? You got to write 3,000 to fill up 15 minutes.
Yeah, I can't memorize that.
Right.
So I can only tell real stories. And so what I'm doing on stage is generally about 6 months behind my real life. And they have to be real stories. Some people love it. Like, after shows, I get people that go, oh my God, I relate it. Like the show we just did. What's his name?
She loved to hear that. The show we just did. Anyway.
Jeremy Asbrock come over to me, and I was like a little, holy shit. And he comes over and goes, I got a kid, 5-year-old, totally got everything you talked about. And I was like, yeah, all right. Like, so like, maybe I don't like have the broad perspective. I'm more for like parents. Maybe that's, I don't even know. I'm just making that up right now, but maybe, people with kids, they relate to what I do. Like 20-year-old, they might go like, I don't like that guy's comedy. That's fine. You don't have to. Yeah.
So when you were starting out in that whole era, were you thinking bouncing from comedy to TV? Because I know a lot of that was happening during all that. People were getting sitcoms. People were TV seemed to be kind of a goal.
Well, yeah, and you're an actor.
Yeah.
And plus, you've got background in that.
And Rodney Dangerfield. He's an actor. He was an actor, right?
Well, he played Rodney and everything, but yeah.
I mean, I would love any kind of crossover kind of thing, but like, I always treated them separate, as a separate art,
Gotcha.
And it's the same as I got into writing. And like, I love writing for other people. I had a little stint where I got to write for Weekend Update on SNL.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that. What years were that, and how did that work out?
That was 8 years ago. for 4 years.
Okay.
So it was during the election, the first Trump election.
Who was doing the update? I can't even remember now.
Michael Che and Colin Jost.
Oh,
Yeah.
And I was just a contributing writer. It was no big deal, but I really enjoyed it when I enjoyed it, and then I got burnt out from it.
How fun is it to get one of your jokes through in a situation like that and hear them deliver it? It must be a great feeling.
It's and I had a friend who worked on the staff, and he would tell me if a joke made it to rehearsal, and I would get so pumped up because you wouldn't know if it makes it to air.
You're like almost there.
So I'd be at a comedy show, somewhere in the middle of the country, and be like, "Shit, is there a TV around? I gotta watch and see if it made it." Then I'm sitting there hoping, because if it does, a check's coming.
Yeah.
Come on, joke.
What a strange, cool thing to be able to do that and sit down at your house and just hammer something out and then wait and see somebody deliver it on TV.
Yeah, the hard part was because of the election, it was like anything you would write, there were 5 days of Fallon, Kimmel, The Daily Show taking swipes at the same topics. So it's like, it's so hard to write original stuff, for a political pundit or a political, time. So it was like so hard because it's like, well, I know they're going to do a joke on that. Conan's probably going to do a joke on that. So it was kind of like watching, your kid get its ass kicked.
Well, especially with that election too, because you might be working on a bit and the next day something so outlandish might be happening that just deems the one you were working on. Because every day some crazy shit was happening. It's like, well, that's boring now. Look what happened today.
Well, then also after it started to get like to the last, up to the election, you didn't even have to write jokes. It was just like, they would just read the headline and then act it out.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like they didn't have to write punchlines. It was like, oh, they're just going to act out what the headline was.
Yeah.
And so it's like, man, we might be out of jobs soon.
Yeah.
Does it really work like that where you write as much as you can, send it in, and if they use it, that you get paid?
Yeah, it's very unfortunate.
Did you get to keep any of the material that got, well, I guess it was all topical and of the time. So it's like you write it for that week. And if it doesn't get in, like, well, I can't really use that anymore.
In the email they would send you, you can toss it on Twitter, after weekend update. So all your Twitter stuff would be a week behind.
Yeah.
So you'd have to put like last week, blah, 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 blah.
Last week when I wrote this.
Are we allowed to talk about the pilot you just did?
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
Radio.
So I was so lucky to get the opportunity to do it, but and you guys both got to watch it.
Yep.
And how did that come about? That's you wrote it, and
it's a great idea, by the way, because that was a strange time and stuff that blew up that had never happened before, and it was mind bending to see all of these. Yeah.
It was really crazy. So you get somebody wants to make it, so you get the financing for it. And I wrote this script like 5 years ago and just kept updating it.
We should probably explain to people who haven't seen the trailer, who is very few, what it is basically the show's is.
It's basically like a morning radio show. The shock jocks lose their job and have to go into the real world. Politically correct, woke world, and they're shock jocks. So they're the exact opposites, and they have to go out and figure out how to make a living. And they're so dinosaurs, they've never heard of podcasting. So they're going to podcast on the side. And I really wish it would get picked up even just this season, because the first season arc was so fun. But the pilot is when they lose their job and kind of explaining who they are. Is
there a season filmed already, or is it just the script?
No,
just the pilot.
We only filmed the pilot, and then we have it all scripted out. So we're hoping somebody would pick it up. But
with our millions of fans that watch this, clearly somebody's going to pick it up.
Somebody just
our reach. It's gold.
But
No,
like every city has those jocks, that they're the local, they're only big in their little town,
Yep.
and they might not even be big there.
They're just the only game in town.
Yeah. And so to have these guys, and then the guys we got, it was Paul Provenza and Rick Overton. As a director, they made me look amazing because they were just so good.
Yeah.
And then they would start riffing. As a writer, I'd be like, yeah, let's keep that. That's funnier than what I wrote.
So did you have any experience in actually making TV or making any of that movies or any other than you and your brother, clearly, but like as far as the whole setup and like what all goes into making a pilot? Because I'm sure it's a lot.
Yeah. I fast forward from where we were about comedy and up to a while ago, I really got into shooting film because I'm not in the cool kids club with the comedy scene. Like there's a lot of comics that are like, they're the it people and they get things. And they like, I don't even get the opportunity to go in and get told no.
Right.
Like I'm a guy who I love comedy. And so it would be like, I'll do the road. And then I had all these friends of mine who are like, nah, I'm going to stick around the city because I want to get an agent and TV and whatever. And so I never got in that clique. So I had to make my own stuff. So it was like, I have dozens of short films that I've shot. I have 3 feature films that are out there that you can find.
What are they?
I keep continuing. There's a Dark State, which came out during the pandemic.
Hey, we put a record out right before the pandemic. It's great timing on both of our parts.
Yeah. We got AMC gave us distribution.
Oh,
We're
shit.
in AMC theaters, but then nobody's allowed to go to the theaters anymore. So
Brutal.
that didn't work out. But it was a fun film, and then we had another one, Days of Power, which is it's like a teenage thriller. It's like a good thriller horror type movie for like a teenager.
Okay.
It's not over the top Jigsaw or whatever. It's
Right.
a little tamer, but and then we did this pilot, and there's another one that's not out yet called The Devil's Tree, and actually Jonathan Davis of Korn plays the bad guy in it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So is it a lot different making, like you say, a teen drama or whatever than it is to making something comedic, or is it basically the same thing? You're just writing script.
So it's the same. It's like just a different muscle. You know, I guess it would be like you guys switching styles of music.
I got
like,
you.
oh, this is going to have a little more of a country twang. This will have more of a rock edge. So it's kind of the same. And like when I was in acting school, we had the like, what's your goals or whatever. And my whole goal and thought process is every day I can be creative and I make a living. I beat the system.
Yep.
So that's all it's about. You know, it's like, I don't care to be the most famous comic. I don't care to be a famous actor. I take the money, but the fame doesn't entice me. It's the creating something and telling stories for people. And I love directing now, and I do a lot of theater. I direct a lot of theater, and it's friends of mine's scripts, and I love telling their story for them. And I think it's something really cool to watch actors. They build this thing, and you're kind of like the orchestra guy, and you get them to all work together, and it comes together, and then you put it in front of an audience, and people, hopefully like it, what you create.
So do you get into a thing where like you're doing a bunch of writing and a bunch of directing and going, shit, I just want to go out and do some stand-up. And then while you're doing stand-up all the time going, I want to go back and do some directing, because it's two completely different things. One, you got a whole team, and one, you're just by yourself. You're number one, you're by yourself, but number two, you don't have to worry about anybody but yourself, which is the complete opposite of the other.
I think that's why I do a lot. That's why my hands are in a lot of things, is as soon as I start to lose interest, I have to switch to something else.
Right.
Because with stand-up, you get these guys and I look up to them and I think, holy shit, maybe if I had that dedication, I would be further along in my life. They're like, I wake up every day and I write 2 hours.
Right.
And I have to pump out a new 20 minutes every month, and I have to, I don't have that dedication. I have to be inspired. Something has to happen. I shit my pants in a helicopter. That's going to be a bit now. I'm
looking forward to that one.
I'll send you the clip.
I love it. The clip of you shitting your pants or the comedy routine?
I can do both. It was on a USO tour. I'm pretty sure it's documented.
So how are those tours? I know you've done a lot for the military and traveled to a bunch of different countries.
That's really cool.
What are those like? They've got to be at a very appreciative audience.
It's very intimidating, but very rewarding. You walk into a base and there's people that are all dusty and they're holding their guns. They just got off, being out in the field, and you hear, we're at one base and they got bombed. A car that was out on, I don't know what you call it. They're driving around to check the perimeters or whatever. Right. And they got bombed and they lost a couple guys. Oof. And you go in and you see these people's faces that are just like, but then when you make them laugh, and at the end of the show, they come over and they're just hugging you and telling you how important it was that we were there. And you're sitting there like, all I did is tell dick jokes. Like, you guys are you're actually doing stuff,
But man, how valuable is that if you just lost a couple of buddies and somebody can come in and make you belly laugh? I mean, that's, cleansing, I'm sure, for those people, because there's probably not a whole lot of belly laughing going on around those situations.
Yeah, they're the best tours you can do, because they're just so, you actually feel like you're making a difference. You go to Pittsburgh and you go to, whatever, Rochester, and you tell jokes to a bunch of drunk people. It's like, yeah, this is fun. This is great. But it's not like important. It's not like, but then you do it for somebody who, the Wounded Warriors were on one tour with us, and there's like guys that are, just, they recovered and they brought them back over to see where they got injured, and get them cracking up and forget about their lives for a little bit. It was like, all of a sudden you start feeling like all this emotions about how important it is. And now, this is the most rewarding thing you can do is, try to help, because I couldn't join the military. Right. I'd be the worst soldier ever.
And then after a situation like that, you fly right back home and go right back to Rochester and like, what the fuck happened here? It's like,
what am I doing with my life?
Yeah, it's like having a day job playing in a band. You go out and you're a rock star on the weekends. You come back and it's like Monday at the warehouse, like, fuck, man. Got to make it to Thursday.
So, before we let you go, I got to ask you, what's your own personal Papa Willie story or experience or whatever? Do you know who the person is? You know what? I have two things I want to tell. One is I fell in love with your grandfather after I met my wife. My wife took me to Farm Aid for the first time. When? What year? Do you know?
It would have been, let me see. We've went every year since. It was the first one we went to was the one in Philly, or it was Camden, New Jersey. It wasn't Philly.
Oh, okay.
And then we went every year that I was home, that I wasn't on the road. And she introduced me into the deep cuts of Willie Nelson, Neil Young, and all she really brought me into that world. I knew the hits. Right. I wasn't like a deep cut person, but my wife knows. She knows all the music, so
she's got good taste.
Yeah, so she introduced me to all that. Because it's funny, growing up in Ohio, I thought I didn't like country music. Like I was like, I don't like country music. That's what my parents listened to. That's what my grandparents listened to. And then there used to be a bar on the Upper West Side called Yogi's. And it was a country bar. It was great. And we would go there. And I was like underage. I shouldn't have even been there. And I was singing along to all the songs. And all the people I worked with at the club were like, thought you didn't like country. And I'm like, I guess I do. I don't know.
Turns out I'm a big fan.
Yeah, turns out I know all the songs. But so there's that. I have a crazy Johnny Cash story.
Okay.
Lay it on us.
Okay.
I was working in Syracuse, New York, and I was put up in where they had a condo where they put us up at instead of a hotel. And I walked out. I'm hungover. I go outside, and there's a dumpster filled with furniture and all this stuff. Like somebody must have died, and they were throwing all their shit out. And I walk by, and I see a box, a little cardboard box. And as I'm walking to my car, I looked in the box, and it was a Johnny Cash program for a concert.
Huh.
And I was like, oh shit, if I come back and nobody picked that up, I'm going to grab it and take it up to the room. And I'd like draw pictures and shit during the day while I wait for my show. I come back and I lift it up, and there's like a photo album underneath. I pop open the photo album, and it's like old school photos of Johnny Cash and his family.
Wow.
Like backstage and like at a barbecue, and it's him and his family just doing stuff. And I like flipped it over, and it'd say like Columbus, Ohio, 1979. And I'm like, what the fuck? So I grab it, and I think I'm like being punked. Like, what the hell? And I take it up to the room, and I flip through, and I found all these pictures of Johnny Cash like hanging out at his house, washing his car, like doing normal everyday shit. And there's autographed pictures of the Tennessee Three and
What?
June Carter. And
June
I'm like,
Carter naked, and well, probably not.
Unfortunately, none of that. I would have spent the afternoon with that. But I have no idea.
Oh, so you don't
whose
even
it could have been.
You still have no idea where or how. Do you still have it?
Yeah, I have it up in my room. I'm like, I have no idea what to do with this, but I know I didn't want it to go to a garbage dump.
Yeah. Well, I know John Carter. If you really wanted to if you want to hold on to it, we won't tell him. But if you wanted to,
well, it's in the podcast universe now.
yeah.
Maybe we can at least get to the bottom of the mystery.
John Carter, if you listen to this and you want it back, I'm sure Mark will give it to you. But if you don't reach out, then
and if you are listening, I was just joking about your mother's naked pictures.
he's probably not naked pictures of his mom somewhere. But Mark, thanks for doing this with us. You're awesome.
Yeah, man. Thanks for
Something
doing
else though about your grandpa that I think is something that's so cool. I always, anything he does, I get excited to check out. And even his books, the fact that he opens every chapter with a joke, it just speaks volumes of who this man is. Yeah. And to hear his stories and him making jokes about, every chapter had a joke to start with. And even like in the Dukes of Hazzard, that was him just improvising and having fun. Like that is a funny bastard.
It's
and
true.
I just feel like he's just the coolest. And,
he's just like that. He's always trying to be funny, or he always is funny. He's not trying to be.
He's got jokes, as they say.
Yeah, he's always finding the funny in everything.
I love it. Which is how you get through life, really, I think.
Yeah.
You got to.
Definitely.
Got to find the humor in everything.
Oh, man. So wait, before you guys let me go, I want to hear on you guys, when you're out on the road and you're working with another band, like, what do you look for in a musician? Like, what's something you're like, you're going to watch this band that's going to go up before you? Like, what gets you excited to work with a band or not?
I like a band that has music with catchy melodies. I'm a melody girl, so the melody's got to be there for me, as far as like if I like the music. We'd probably not watch the show.
Yeah, I was about to say.
If you're going to be honest, I'm going to be honest too. We probably wouldn't watch the show unless they were good friends of ours. We're probably
the headliners are when we get more excited of opening for other people than because when you're it's probably like you guys. I don't know, but before we play, it's you just kind of want to be left alone, and everybody does whatever they do to get ready to play. You hang out, have a couple of beers or whatever, but it's not a big, huge party. And if there's a really good band, you'll poke your head around and check them out and go, holy shit, these guys are good. But you're not going to stand there and watch the whole thing, because you got your own shit to deal with.
Yeah. And I don't want to talk too much to too many people. And if you're watching a show, you have to talk over music. If people are wanting to talk or tell me a story about my grandpa or something,
Yeah.
If I'm talking to them, then I'm just using my voice before I have to go belt out some high notes over a rock band. You know what I mean? So I try to save all that for after. But yeah, we love opening for people and then watching those shows because, of course, they're usually way cooler than us.
Yeah, but any band that gets up there and is just slaying and maybe destroying some stuff, or it looks like it's about to fall apart, that's my favorite kind of stuff, actually. That dangerous kind of like they're teetering on just completely falling apart or getting through. The Replacements, one of my favorite bands, an old punk band, was like that.
Yeah.
They were either shit-faced and horrible or the greatest American rock and roll band at the time, and you never knew, somewhere in between. And they were interesting in the fact that, like, generally a band, if somebody's having a bad night, the other people in the band will kind of pick them up and carry them. These guys, if they noticed somebody had a bad night, they would just jump on and go bury the ship with this guy and just go down in flames. Just that kind of shit, which is kind of comedy too. But that's my favorite kind of stuff.
Mayhem.
What's your best bomb? Do you guys bomb on stage ever? And just show
Our worst show was at the Family Watch.
Yeah, we played one here in Nashville early on.
What? Something's wrong with your guitar?
And the sound was bad, and it's you get that. I'm sure it's the same feeling. You're about halfway through, and you're just, as you're singing and playing, you're thinking, I made a conscious decision to be here right now and do this. What the fuck was I thinking? And how can we just not stop? And we all know, everybody realizes this is a bomb. Can we not just quit now and go away and be done with it? Now, we have played festivals.
Do you remember that one show? It was with Sarah drumming with us, and it was at that weird church studio over on the other side of town. That was a bad one. But your side of town.
We were just too drunk at that time.
Yeah, we were really, really drunk. And Sarah's drum fell off at some point, and then you were beatboxing.
Oh, yeah, she lost a kick drum or something. She was trying to grab it, and I'm going...
He's beatboxing and playing guitar. And I'm trying to figure out where we are in the song based on his beatboxing to start the show.
I don't know if that was a bomb or a triumph, actually. Beatboxing during the song. Yeah, it was
my hands
That was the night you covered G-Love.
Yeah, exactly.
We have covered Lottie Dottie because we had time to kill, and you just started.
Yeah, the old Slick Rick and Dougie Fresh, Lottie Dottie. Well, we went through that entire thing. We were playing with the drummer that we picked up at one gig, and he played everything really, really fast.
And our songs are fast, but they were all a minute and a half.
It's kind of my fault. I'm like, dude, you really can't play these too fast. And it turns out you can.
You can.
So we had to kill time in the middle. I'm like, holy shit, we're going to run out of songs. I got this. I'm going to do a little Lottie Dottie, but yeah.
Who's the band that you'd be embarrassed if it came on the iPod and you guys are driving?
That we like?
That you like, but everybody else would make fun of you for.
I'm just trying to think. I'm a sucker for that old AM Gold shit, like the DeFranco Family, Heartbeat, It's a Love Beat, all that stuff that I listen to. If that came on, I would know every word to it, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But new stuff, I can't really think of anything that's all that. I'm way too cool to listen to music that's not.
I think if a deep Britney Spears cut came on and I knew it, I would be really embarrassed that you guys were listening to me sing "Bombastic Love" by Britney Spears because that was not a hit.
Yeah, that's true. Well, you wouldn't be embarrassing because we expect that from you.
I love it. What? Are you going to join when you guys both come on our podcast for Drinks Jokes?
I was wondering, is that cool with you? Because we're actually podcasting there and we can just keep all this set up and do it.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to say that unless you offered that.
I would love it.
What is the podcast called? Tell everyone where they can listen to it and all that, and that will be on it.
Yeah, so it's Drinks, Jokes, and Storytelling. And that's Drinks, Jokes, the letter N, Storytelling. And basically the premise of it was we get drunk and tell jokes with comedians, but somehow it turned into we've had NASCAR people on, we've had actors on, we've had musicians, we've, run the gamut of, if you're an artist, we opened it up to everybody, not just comedians, because we realized we hit up all of our friends.
We're running out of friends.
Yeah. What are we going to have them back on? We better open it up to more. We've had Broadway actors on, anybody who's in the arts. We would love hearing, just crazy stories from the road or from wherever. I saw you guys had Lisa Lampanelli on.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
So Richie and I are old friends with Lisa. Like, we remember her back when she was big.
Oh yeah.
and
gnarly, man. She was just a murderer back then.
And she told us over and over, I'm not the Queen of Mean anymore. I'm putting together a one-woman show, and I'm here to help people in the LGBTQ community. And it's not the same Lisa. And we're like, who cares? We don't care. We've known you for 20 years. Like, just come on. She goes, okay. And she was running late. She goes, I'll be on. You guys start without me, because we usually go live on Twitch and then release it edited version later.
Yeah.
She comes on. The second she comes on, she's like, look at you two fat fucks. And just roasted us for the first 20 mints.
That's great.
I thought you said you didn't roast anymore. And she goes, I took one look at you two fat bastards and I had to.
Hilarious.
And hey, I wanted to say, you kind of dressed up in Van Halen like attire right now.
Oh, you know who?
Isn't that the
It's got stripes.
scheme? And the red and the white and the black?
Yeah.
Red, white, black.
Can I get it up?
Oh, Lonely
Hold hold on. Lansky's.
Lansky's.
This is Elvis's clothing.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
Oh,
This
well,
is
that's
from
cool.
Elvis movie.
Nice.
that's even cooler.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you guys for having me on.
Yeah, dude, this was great.
This was really good.
I'd love to do it in studio with you next time I come down.
Yep.
Next time you come to Nashville, we'll book it.
All right. Oh, man. Thank you again for having me. And thanks for being so cool.
Yeah.
I guess we'll see you in a little while.
Thanks for being cool, too. We'll see you next week.
Yeah.
Mark Riccadonna is my favorite comedian.
Yeah, he was great. I love that dude. Good
Yeah,
stories.
great stories.
Great stories.
Great stories.
Anybody with a Greg Giraldo story is a friend of mine. Anyway, stay tuned and check out our next episode.
Enjoy your groceries.
I know your mama's name.
Don't be an asshole. And we free Brittany.
This intro and outro is a disaster.